It's 2:14 in the morning, and you are counting quarters into a tray for a man in an idling semi-truck. Highway 9, southbound exit, toll booth 4. He doesn't look at you. Nobody ever looks at you here. The heater hums under the counter, the rain comes down in long gray lines on the glass, and the radio behind you is playing something with the volume turned low enough that you can't make out the words. You hand him his change like you have every night for the last 6 years. 2,190 nights, give or take. What he doesn't know is that you are worth $14,600,000. Not on paper, in theory, in some hypothetical exit that hasn't happened yet. In actual accounts, sitting still, earning interest while you sleep through the day. 4 LLCs, none of them carrying your name. 11 properties spread across 3 counties. A retirement account you have never touched and don't plan to touch for another 20 years. A savings account that earns more in a single month than this booth pays you in 4. You drive a 2009 Honda Civic with 190,000 miles on it. You buy your jeans at the same big box store you've bought them at since you were 22. You clip coupons, not out of habit perform for an audience, because there is no audience, but because the spreadsheet taught you that small leaks sink ships, and the lesson never fully turned itself off. Nobody who passes through this booth and nobody who works this booth beside you has any reason to think you're anything but a man counting quarters at 2 in the morning. Here's how you got here. At 19, you were stocking shelves at a hardware store in a town that was already dying. The steel plant had closed 4 years earlier. Houses were going for nothing, sometimes literally. $1 at the county clerk's office just to get them off the tax rolls. You had $1,800 saved, money you'd been putting aside since you were 16 from birthdays and a paper route, and you used it to buy a half-acre parking lot outside the old plant at a county auction. Nobody else bid. You didn't know what you were doing. You just knew the number was small enough that losing it wouldn't ruin you. And that was the whole strategy for years. Never risk what you can't afford to watch disappear. At 23, a logistics company needed lot space for idle trailers. You leased it to them for $1,100 a month, which was more than the lot had cost you in a single year. You sold the lot 2 years after that for $41,000 to a man building a truck stop, and you didn't spend a cent of it. You opened a brokerage account instead and put it into index funds, and 2 storage units you bought sight unseen off a foreclosure list. At 27, you owned 5 properties, all bought the same quiet way, all routed through an LLC with a name that meant nothing to anyone who read it. A storage facility, 2 more parking lots, a duplex you never lived in and rented to a family you've met exactly once. None of it looked like wealth from the outside. It looked like paperwork, manila folders, a filing cabinet in a rented storage unit you also happened to own. At 31, your net worth crossed $9 million. You found this out on a Tuesday, doing your own taxes at your kitchen table, using a program that cost $40 a year, and didn't know what to make of you either. At 34, which is now, the number is 14,600,000. You found this out the same way you find everything out, a spreadsheet, a Tuesday. You expected somewhere in the climbing that a number like that would announce itself, that you would feel it arrive, the way people describe feeling a diagnosis arrive, or a death. It didn't. The night the spreadsheet first crossed 10 million, you were sitting in this same Civic in the parking lot of a gas station, eating a sandwich that cost $4.19 because you hadn't had dinner and the gas station was open and the diner wasn't. You looked at the number for maybe 6 seconds. Then you finished the sandwich. Then you drove to work because your shift started at 10 and you don't like being late. Not even now. Not even for a job you no longer need. Here is what nobody tells you about getting rich quietly. The money does not change the day. It changes the ceiling above the day. The theoretical maximum of what could happen if something went wrong, but the day itself stays exactly the same shape it always was. You could, if you wanted, walk into this booth tomorrow and not come back. You don't. Partly because the LLCs need a clean, modest income on paper to keep the IRS uninterested in asking questions you'd rather not answer. Partly because 6 years of routine is its own kind of armor, and you are not entirely sure who you are without the booth, the heater, the tray of quarters. partly because your father lost everything twice, once to a bookie and once to a business partner who smiled a lot. And you learned early, watching him, that the people who know what you have are very often the people who eventually try to take it from you. So you tell no one, not Denny, who has worked the booth next to yours for 4 years and has decided on his own that you're saving up for a truck and brings it up every few months like he's checking on your progress. Not your mother, Ruth, who still asks if you need money for rent and means it every single time, who would be horrified to learn how long you've let her worry for nothing. The cost of this life is small and it is constant, which is its own kind of expensive. It is skipping your cousin's wedding because the seating chart would put you next to relatives who'd ask what you do for money, and you'd have to lie to their faces for 4 hours straight over chicken or fish. It is eating the same $4 sandwich most nights, not because you can't afford better, but because buying better would mean explaining to Denny why you suddenly have money for better, and the explanation isn't worth the sandwich. It is lying awake some nights doing math you don't need to do anymore, the old reflexive arithmetic from when $18 actually mattered, because some part of your brain never received the memo that it's over. It is the particular, low-grade loneliness of being the only person alive who knows the truth about your own life, and having no one to tell it to who wouldn't immediately want something from it. You have thought more than once about telling Ruth, about sitting her down at her own kitchen table and showing her the spreadsheet, watching her face do whatever it would do. You have never done it. You tell yourself it's about her safety, about the LLCs, about not wanting to become the relative everyone calls when their car breaks down or their landlord raises the rent. Some of that is true. The rest of it is that you don't know who you'd be to her once she knew. Right now you are her son who works nights at the toll booth and never asks her for anything. You don't know what you'd be after, and some nights that uncertainty feels heavier than the money does. It's 2:14 in the morning again, 3 nights later, and you are counting quarters into a tray for a different man in a different idling truck. The heater hums. The rain has stopped. Denny waves from the next booth over, mouths something about a football score, and you wave back the way you always do. The number in the spreadsheet last you checked was $14,810,000, climbing the way it always climbs quietly in the background while you do this. You hand the man his change. He says thanks without looking up and drives off into the dark toward wherever he's going. You wonder sometimes what number would finally feel like something.